Bob Chapman, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, well, I finally got it. Well,
I want to hear the rest of the story now.
All right,
Come
fine.
on.
Well, basically what happened was that the question was, have you ever thought you're worshiping the wrong God? Because basically, look at the condition the world is in, the wars, the revolutions, the famine, the poverty, the hunger. This is what your God has done. I mean, did you ever stop to think that maybe we ought to be worshiping Lucifer? And, of course, how are we going to answer that? Well, basically, I just said, I'm just so glad you asked that question. I think that this is probably the most important question that's been asked all evening, because, of course, I want the people to really understand that there are people like you who actually do worship Lucifer. This is the old Gnostic heresy, and, of course, this is what's going on today. We'll be right back. Well, this is Dr. Stan. Well, Bob, tell us about what's going on financially. Certainly, we're told we should really be elated because, after all, the incidence of people losing their jobs is decreasing. We only lost, 360 or 340,000 jobs last month. Isn't that wonderful? But nobody ever points out, well, why are we creating new jobs? How are we going to get a recovery if we don't have new jobs?
Well, I was watching CNBC today, and there were two people arguing that. And, Mr. Obama said by this time he would have created 600,000 jobs, and, of course, he hasn't. And, one of the things that really wasn't discussed and never does get much mileage is the fact that the government, and we're getting a little bit more of this in the press, finally, some of the writers are catching on, and that is that they're paying attention to U6. Now, U6 is a government-produced estimate of unemployment. It takes the 9.4% of those people who are unemployed, which is a short-term unemployment, and it adds in the people who are no longer collecting state unemployment, people who have been reduced to part-time jobs, and also people who are discouraged. In other words, they're not looking for work because they just can't find any. And that figure is 16.4%. That includes a thing called the birth-death ratio, which means the government can make up any figure they want without any bearing whatsoever, without any statistics whatsoever, that reflects the hiring, you might call it phantom hiring, of people in small and medium-sized companies that are not adequately covered. Now, it could be that there are minuses there rather than pluses. And what I mean by that is this. They say X amount of jobs were created this past month in May through this birth-death ratio. And they tell you what it is. It's the largest in the last couple of years. And it's certainly the largest for May in some time. It could be the other way. Jobs weren't created, they were lost, but the government never reports that. So I want you to understand that. So that 16.4% includes all that and the garbage, which is the birth-death ratio. I compilate what the unemployment under U6 is not using birth-death, and that figure is 20.2%. And that's a real figure. I don't know what John Williams' figure is this week. I'll probably catch up on it soon, but it's probably higher than mine. And I think we'll be 25% by the end of the year. I think we might have sideways next year. Maybe it might go up a wee bit. The following year is going to be disastrous. will go right up over 30%, maybe to 35 pretty easily. And that's where I think that's all headed.
Well, because it's the old adage that figures don't lie, but liars figure, and they work for the government. They do what they're told to do. And the last thing you want for the American people to know is how bad things really are. And, of course, more and more companies are going into bankruptcy. Two of the largest bankruptcies this ever occurred last month with Chrysler and General Motors going down. And the market, anybody who doesn't believe the stock market is manipulated only has to ask, why when General Motors, the largest American corporation to ever go bankrupt, why on the very day General Motors went into bankruptcy, did the stock market go up? I mean, it doesn't make any sense unless you understand it's manipulated, and that it all makes sense. And incidentally, for anybody who'd like to check it out, it's the Working Group on Financial Markets. The Working Group on Financial Markets. You can look it up on the Internet, or look for the Plunge Protection Team, and they'll explain to you how it works. It's illegal to manipulate the market unless you're the government agencies. Well, Bob, certainly what's happening?
I want to make a comment on that. And that is this. I got a letter today from one of the subscribers who was watching CNBC more deeply than I was during the course of the day. I did several radio programs, so I concentrate when I'm talking about what's not going on the screen. And CNBC must be getting a lot of heat because Art Cashin, who works for UBS or one of these firms, said, the reason the market jumps up at the end of the day is that something to the effect that they want to put bids up to equal their holdings as specialists or market makers. And that is absolutely just untrue. I mean, he just lied. And they want to avoid talking about the Working Group in the financial markets. About a week ago, I was watching this poor soul from Everbank, Mr. Butler, and he had said something about the Working Group in financial markets, and they just ripped him to pieces. I only wish I was there to help him, because I would have ripped them to pieces. And I know two of the people real well. Bill Keene and Sue Herrera and I worked together at FNN years ago in Santa Monica. In fact, every time they had a spot open, they'd call me and say, can you come in today on the way home? Because I lived in Malibu. I had to go right by their place, more or less. And so I got to know them real well. And I would have said to them, look, I have right here in my hand the actual executive order 12631, and you're telling me it doesn't exist. Because that's what they told Mr. Butler. They told him, that doesn't exist. I mean, what are you talking about? And the poor guy was so flustered. He probably hadn't been on television before. He's probably terrified. You know, he wasn't a street fighter. And I would have lit into them. Because, you know, this is the kind of thing that we cannot tolerate. Out in the open, lying by people on television.
But
you know, they can evade.
But, Bob, they do it all the time. And Cramer's going on telling everybody get into this stock market so you don't miss this great new bull market. Cramer's encouraging people to get into this market, and it's a trap.
But I know that. But that is an opinion. What I'm dealing with is a fact. A fact. There's an executive order that exists that they say doesn't exist. It's not an opinion. They know it exists. They're lying.
Okay.
Maybe he is, but that's not the point.
Okay.
It's an opinion on his part.
Right. Well, anybody
There's a
will
big difference. These people, and you know, if you lie by omission, that's something else. You really can't get to that because, you know, omission is something you just forget maybe to include. So there's an out there. But when you say it doesn't exist, you're just straight out lying. And that's what's going on CNBC. And yes, we have people like this character you just mentioned, whatever his name is, Kramer, misleading people. He's been doing it for a long time. He's just a cheerleader. He's a terrible person, but he doesn't care. I mean, you got to live on Wall Street for 28 years like I did to understand how evil these people are. I mean, anything goes.